While Shakespeare is one of the most well-known authors of all time, he is also one of the most elusive. Not much is known about him besides a basic timeline and family tree. This is primarily due to the fact that he lived during the Elizabethan age, a time where it was hard to keep track of everyone's records. Due to the lack of information, scholars and historians are left to search through Shakespeare's works for clues to the type of person he was. What did he believe in? What did he fear? These are all questions that can be answered by analyzing many of Shakespeare's works for clues. There is a widespread belief that Shakespeare was a possible Catholic. Not only did he come from a Catholic background, his mother, Mary Arden, was a member of a well-known Catholic family, but there are also subtle biblical references in many of his works. One example of this is in Shakespeare's The Tempest. One of the main characters, Prospero, bears uncanny similarities to the story of Joseph. Prospero and Joseph are both victims of jealous siblings. Due to them both being the favorite sibling, they are subjected to sabotage by their brothers. In the story of Joseph, his brothers do not want to directly inflict any pain on him, so they decide to leave him in a well to be at the mercy of the elements. Similarly, Prospero's brother does not want to hurt Prospero physically. Instead, he ships his daughter away, leaving her to fend for herself. Here is an example from Act 1, Scene 2 of The Tempest. In few they hurried us aboard a bark, bore us some leagues to sea where they prepared, a rotten carcass of a butt, not rigged, nor tackle, sail, nor mast, the very rats, instinctively have quit it. There they hoist us, to cry to the sea that roared to us, to sigh to the winds, whose pity, sighing back again, did us but loving wrong. Despite these similarities, many scholars argue that Shakespeare was an atheist. References to a god are never explicit and usually use words that are synonymous or indicate that there is a god. Historical records also never show anyone ever seeing Shakespeare attend any religious service. Despite these counter-arguments, one must admit that many of his works bear striking resemblance to the scripture. Shakespeare's works also give us some insight into his views on life after death. Many of his characters choose to be ignorant to the finality of death and often talk about the life to come. Here is a quote from Hamlet. "Something after death, the undiscovered country, from whose bourne no traveler returns." This is a direct reference to something after death. In addition, many characters in his plays are haunted by ghosts. One of the most notable examples can be found in Julius Caesar, when Brutus is visited by the ghost of Julius Caesar, whose assassination he had played a major part in. The play, Hamlet, also speaks of the next life. In Act 5, Scene 2, Hamlet says that there is a divinity that shapes our ends. In addition, when speaking to Horatio in the beginning of the play, Act 1, Scene 5, he says, "There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy." Because of these examples, I am inclined to believe that Shakespeare was indeed a believer in the afterlife. Fate and the power man has over his life on earth plays a major role in Shakespeare's works. Continuing with Hamlet, Hamlet explains, "There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." Act 2, Scene 2. Essentially, what you think, you become. This view that free will plays a role in one's fate is also the cornerstone of the famous play Julius Caesar. Throughout the entire play, characters are both using their free will to ignore fate and attempt to change it. Julius Caesar constantly ignores every warning that his death is imminent, which leads him to his horrible fate of assassination. Oppositely, Cassius does everything in his power to attempt to change his fate. The whole reason he forms the coup to prevent Caesar's rise to power is to prevent a fate in which Rome falls at his hands. He even goes as far to commit suicide, which he sees as the ultimate domination of fate. Although it is never explicitly stated, and the audience is meant to draw their own conclusions, it would be safe to say that free will is something that fascinated Shakespeare. To write an entire play with it as such a major theme, one must certainly have passionate opinions on the matter. Shakespeare's works are the last remaining pieces of his life. Like any good author, he poured his soul into his plays. Because of this, one can get a feel for the person he was by reading them closely. Scholars have analyzed every word he wrote endlessly in order to try and understand how he viewed the world. Many believe him to have believed in Catholicism due to the parallels between his plays and biblical stories. His character's obsession with the life to come also provide cause that he too believed that there was such thing as the afterlife. This is only furthered by his inclusion of fate as a theme in many of his works. Even though we are given all this information, it is important to acknowledge that literary works are open to interpretation. So, many scholars debate about what he truly believed in. It will forever remain one of the greatest historical mysteries, but for sure will continue to be studied by scholars all over the world.